What is the creepiest, strangest thing that has happened to you, or a friend or family member, that creeps you out to this day? Lived in the Hollywood Hills and this happened in the early 80s. Crazy knocking at my door at 9 PM. I go to answer the door and there's a lady there just hysterical. Talking about there's so much blood. Full stop. She looks normal and is dressed in clean clothing. So we let her in. She tells a story about seeing someone get stabbed. I call the police. And 2 uniformed LAPD officers arrive in 10 minutes. They take the lady away. And tell us that she was reported missing. Has a mental condition and lives up the street. All good. 30 minutes later. Another knock at the door. 2 different cops this time. Responding to the call. They have no idea who the other 2 cops were. Take our information and statements. Description of the officers and the lady as well. Radio conversations back and forth ensue. And they really don't have any idea how any other cops could have picked her up. Because they were given the call 40 minutes ago. I had to take care of my mentally handicapped cousin a few years back. She could get around well enough. But due to severe arthritis in her knees and ankles, she had to be watched. Helped into the bath. Shitty like that. I would go into her room in the morning. Help her to her walker so she could piss. And make her breakfast. One morning I heard the water running in the bathroom when I went to check in on her. I had to pass her room on the way to the bathroom. When I did, I saw that she was in her rocking chair in the corner. Her blanket over her head. And she was rocking back and forth. Don't leave the water on. You're going to flood the place. I went into the bathroom to shut the faucet off. And my cousin was there. Washing her face. I immediately ran back to the room. But it was just her blanket crumbled up in the rocking chair. My cousin wanted to know why I undid her bed. I didn't stay too long after that. When my aunt was in college she took a night lab class that would let out late. One night she was walking back to her car and someone came up behind her. Pressed something into her back. And told her to keep walking. Suddenly a man coming toward her who she had never met before looked at her. Threw open his arms for a hug. And said, "How are you? I haven't seen you in so long." He then whispered, "Play along. He has a gun." My aunt immediately played along. Hugging back and acting excited to see this stranger. The guy who was behind my aunt quickly backed off and walked away. The hero took my aunt to the nearest emergency alert post. Pushed the button for her. And told her to stay put while he went to get help. He never returned. My great-grandfather awoke to a man standing in the corner of the bedroom watching him and my great-grandmother sleeping. They lived out in the middle of nowhere so they never used to lock their doors. Apparently this man had just broken out of a mental institution and walked there. I had a dog once that was super loyal and loving and would always come running to me when I called and would almost crash into me whenever I had treats for him. One day sitting in the living room. All of his hair stood up on his back and he was just staring over my shoe growling and showing his teeth. No matter what I would do to try to get him to come to me, he would never break his stare at that one spot and just kept growling. I eventually carried him out of the room because it was freaking me and my roommates out so bad. My mum told me one that's kinda creepy. When I was a baby, maybe about 6 months old, she put me into my cot to sleep one afternoon. It was a high-sided wooden thing with a drop side for access that required you to press in 2 little nubs. One each corner to release the side. She came upstairs and found me outside the cot. Asleep in the middle of the floor about 2 meters from the cot. The sides were up. There is no way I could have opened it. I couldn't stand and the sides were far too high to jump over. Apparently she never felt comfortable leaving me in the room after that. Also, when my younger brother was born he was put into that room as his bedroom. One evening me and my mum were on her bed playing with my brother who was about 1 year old and we heard this noise coming from his room. Panicked my mum went to look and one of his musical toys was in the cot playing to itself despite not being activated. A few years ago, I taught English in Slovakia. One Friday night, I went out with the rest of the teachers for pizza and other Assuredly wacky shenanigans. Eventually we wound up in this weird underground club. Not really my scene. But whatever. I went to the washroom. And while I was occupied, another guy walked in. He said something in Slovak. I don't speak Slovak. Said sorry. Can't help you. Then I heard this click. Like a cigarette lighter. I started laughing. And made some joke about how smoking wasn't allowed. Washed my hands and left. Then we all decided to head for home. Since I can't read Slovak, I didn't follow local news. Outside what my co-workers told me. Monday morning. Bright and early. I found out that someone shot up that club not long after we left. Apparently his gun jammed and it took him ages to fix it in the washroom. I think I used up every piece of luck I will ever have that night. I worked with a lady once who was pretty old. I'd say about 70 years old. Since our job was pretty boring, we talked a lot and she had all kinds of crazy stories. But this one creeps me out still. She said when her grandma died they had her buried in a wood box in the backyard. As was pretty custom in those days. Years later they have a family plot in a cemetery and decide to dig her grandma up to move her to the family plot. She said when they took the lid off the coffin, it had claw marks all over the inside. The grandma had apparently been buried alive. Holy shit. While taking Amtrak from LA to Portland one summer years ago, this guy started chatting with me in the viewing car. We talked for a bit. We went to the bar and bought a few drinks together. Came up to a 20-minute stop at a station. And we got off together for a smoke. That's when I saw the platform was full of cops. Who immediately began walking towards us. And they grabbed him. Took him away. Turned out that before he ran into me, he'd spent the entire train ride trying to lure kids into the bathroom with promises of candy. TLDR. Spent a few hours on a train being friendly with a child molester. My great-grandmother once had a repairman come over to fix her water heater in the basement. After he fixed it he came upstairs and said that my great-grandfather was really helpful. He had died over a year ago. The twist. Great-grandfather had left a note on the water heater, telling his wife to be sure the pilot light is lit. This happened to my friend. She told me that when she was little she was playing with her little brother and sister one night. Her little brother looked out the window and said, "Who is that man?" They all went to the window to see what he was talking about. She said there was a white figure sitting on top of the telephone pole. Looked like a man. He was staring at them with a huge creepy smile. Then he just stood up and jumped off the pole and simply vanished before they saw him hit the ground. She said it scared them so much. Her sister won't even talk about it. My grandmother told me a story that creeps her out still. Back when my grandfather was alive, my grandmother woke up one night to hear something smash downstairs. She woke my grandfather up and made him go check it out with a baseball bat. And when he got downstairs there was a broken flower pot in the middle of their family room floor. About 20 feet from where it usually was. There was no dirt trail. It was just smashed on the floor in the middle of the room. As if someone dropped it straight down. Oh no. Not again. We were hanging out at a friend's house playing SSBB. And suddenly my friend pauses and mutes the TV. We start listening and there comes this slow sound of a piano key being played. My friend has a wall piano. We all get close. And start calling out to see if anybody is there. No response. So we decided to walk out slowly and take a look at what is making the noise. Turns out one of the mechanisms inside the piano was slipping and the old string was elongating, thus making it sound like it was being played over and over again. We had some laughs after that chilling moments. Also I won the match with Olimar. Late to the party here. Sleeping one night on the couch as my wife had gotten mad at me for doing something stupid. Don't remember what. But I bet that she does. Around 2 AM. I hear sounds from my piano in the other room. Not any particular piece of music, but just random keys being played over and over. I'm scared shitless and hoping my wife hears this so she can come downstairs and check it out. Unfortunately no such luck. TTY music keeps coming from the piano and I'm frozen. Too scared to check it out. After about a minute I gather enough courage to go there and find my Labrador retriever was attempting to get to the donuts that I had accidentally left on top of the piano and was banging on the piano keys while trying to get at them. I've written this a few times before. But basically what happened was I was walking my dog at night. Heard an ear-splitting scream. Assumed it was a fox. Went home. Woke up the next morning and found that a young girl had been murdered less than a kilometer from my house the night before. I was 14 or so years old. My mom was grocery shopping and my brother was at his friend's house. I was all by myself at home. The phone rang and it was my grandma screaming frantically at me. She eventually calmed down enough to say she got a call from my mom saying help. The kids. Over and over again. She said it was our number on the caller ID. I told her this was impossible. My mom was out shopping. She was adamant. My mom walked in while my grandma was still on the phone and my mom calmed her down and assured her we didn't call her. She was still freaked out so we went over to her house. She showed us our number on the caller ID at a time when nobody should have called. It was very creepy. This thread pops up once every 2 weeks. I read it every single time. My neighbor once told me about why he moved out of his old house. The house used to belong to a widow who committed suicide by taking a bullet to the skull. One night, he went to bed and was woken up by a woman on top of him. He thought it was his wife trying to have some SI time. So he went along with it. He was making out with her until he started suffocating. He tried to push her off but she was hella strong. He tried to grab her hair. And as he went for the back of her head, he felt a hole in its skull. He passed out and woke up to a freezing bedroom. His wife recalls nothing. Pretty neat story. My mom just recently told me the story of her friend's creepy dad. One night when she was younger she stayed over at this friend's house. Friend's creepy dad offered them fresh venison for dinner. Mom had never had venison, but of course ate it as not to be rude. Friend later tells mom that her dad is not a hunter. Years later we learned that creepy dad had murdered and cannibalized several women over the course of his life. Mom is pretty sure she ate human meat. A few years ago when my grandpa was really sick me and my family were around his bed all saying our last words to him. Things were going normal. As we were all crying and saying goodbye. A little later his breaths were getting less and less frequent and we knew he was about to go. But on his last breath his eyes opened up really wide. He smiled. Looking the happiest he had in years. And then he was just gone. To this day I still can't imagine what he felt saw. Not sure that's creepy. Rather lovely. This is a story from my boyfriend's mom. When she was a young mom she lived in an affluent community with her 2 little boys. One day, when she was home alone, a man with a bunch of scars all over his face walks up to the doorstep. Instantly, their Doberman starts to freak out. Despite the fact that he was normally the docile type. Next thing she knows, he's knocking on the door, holding a box. Through the door. She asked what he wanted. He said he was delivering a package for the neighbors and had to leave it with someone. He kept insisting that she open the door and take the box. Given that her intuition was setting off serious red flags, she said no and told him to just leave it. After he protested a while longer, she managed to stave him off. Later, when she opened the door, she found the box and opened it to see what was inside, only to find that it was empty. I am 70Y. Oh. When I was about 8Y. Oh. My mom gave me some money and sent me downtown to go to a movie. Rare treat. It was a horror movie about a pair of binoculars rigged with spikes that would pop out and spear the user through the eyes when an attempt was made to focus them. To this day I cannot use binoculars without testing all the adjustments first. I remember being on lookout when I was in the Navy. Hitchhiking home from high school. I know. and get picked up by a really weird guy with stereotypical child molester thick glasses. It was really hot in his truck. He probably had the heat on in retrospect, as we drove along the main road, and at one point he mentioned the heat and that it was okay if I wanted to take off my shirt. For the record, I am a guy. I said no thanks and then opened the door and rolled out into traffic when the truck was coming to a light. Thank God the door handle hadn't been removed or anything. Bonus. I hitchhiked around a year later and the exact same guy pulled up and asked me if I wanted a ride. He didn't recognize me and I said no. And realized at that point that he must do this kind of thing often. I never hitchhiked again after that day. Can I just say the creepy unexplained threads are some of my favorite things on Reddit. A guy who was killing kids in my town had my picture from a newspaper article clipped out and on his bedroom mirror. I was informed by the police who had just arrested him at his house. If you drive to the end of the Sleepy Hollow, that is Pinch, West Virginia, past where the paved road ends, past the remains of crumbling churches and dilapidated trailers, you will come to a dead end and find a yard full of junk cars on one side, and on the other, a huge church that looks like it had been destroyed in a fire then rebuilt, with a playground and 3 mysterious, large blue, metal storage buildings. Here's what makes it creepy. The entire compound is surrounded in F-king barbed wire, and the barbs are pointed inward as if to keep something inside that yard. Additionally, this is so far past civilization. You can't really imagine anyone going to church in a place like this. The whole place just gives me the creeps. One time, I was playing fetch with my dog in the upstairs hallway. I would throw the toy over the balcony to the downstairs, and she'd go run to retrieve it and then run back. We were having fun and all was good. But then on the final throw, I hid by the balcony and the door to my sister's room. My dog came back and found me, dropped the toy, and immediately started growling. I moved closer to see what was wrong, but she didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed behind me. I looked back and there was nothing there. Just the white door and white walls. Then I looked into my dog's eyes and I could see myself in the hallway reflected back. And behind me in the reflection was a dark figure of a person. It looked like a woman. We were completely alone up there. My sister and brother were chatting in the kitchen. I noped the FCK out of there and spent the next few hours downstairs. Okay, so I am at Walmart standing in front of the French bread. Notice this strange guy standing there, staring at the food. About 40 years old. Jeans shorts. Little overweight. Handlebar mustache. Tight shirt. Flip flops. I pick up one loaf of bread and he turns to me with a strange smile. Walk away from Creepiest JPEG. After a while, 30 minutes or so, I change my mind and go back to the bread aisle and that dude is still standing in the same spot, just staring. So I put the bread back. He immediately grabs it, the one I just put down, and storms to the cash register, pays and leaves. That is the only thing he bought. What the hell? Edit. Spelling. Grammar edit 2. Yeah, I am from Europe, but I live in California right now. I cannot make shit like that up. Would have even been better if he sniffed it really intensely. That's what I would have done. When my grandfather was still alive, he had the habit of jingling change in his pocket. He passed away around 1994. Fast forward to 1999 when my little sister is about 5. She, like many kids, had an imaginary friend that she said would wish her good night. When we asked about him, she said he is a nice old man who comes, tucks me in and jingles his money in his pocket. And that makes me laugh. Full stop. We all are like, okay, whatever. She must has overheard one of us telling a story about him jingling his change or whatever. Skip forward a couple of days to us all flipping through a photo album. When out of a family picture of about 15 people, my sister points to my grandpa and says that's him. That's the money man. Full stop. She picked the man who died before she was even conceived. Out of a crowded picture. Still gives me chills. But it's also kinda comforting knowing he was watching over us.